Everyone believes the loud black belt is the threat until the old man with calloused knuckles steps forward. I had spent 18 years as a Marine Raider, so humiliating my rich neighbor's son on the cul-de-sac felt like the end of it. But his 72-year-old grandfather, Haruto Takeda, had been watching. He didn't want a lawsuit. He wanted me alone in his dojo. What followed made the grandson look like a warm-up. I had spent the last 6 years teaching myself to flinch like a normal man. No more scanning rooftops. No more standing with my back to a wall. The cul-de-sac was my retirement, and my daughter's laughter was the only sound I wanted. Then Haruto Takeda arrived. He did not yell or threaten lawsuits. He simply told me he knew what I was. And when he said his grandson only learned to perform, I understood the real fight had just begun. Haruto did not wait for an answer. He inclined his head, not quite a bow, and walked back to the black sedan idling at the curb. The morning air smelled like cut grass and chlorine. I stood in the doorway until the car disappeared, my daughter Sophie's voice behind me asking if I was okay. I said I was fine. I was not fine. 18 years. That is what I gave to the Marine Raiders. I had planned operations in Anbar, survived ambushes in Helmand, and learned that a human body can become a weapon even after the mind has left the fight. The scar under my left collarbone came from a blade in a place I cannot name. The tremor in my right hand only appeared when I heard fireworks. I had retired to this cul-de-sac because I wanted my daughter to believe the world was soft. But the world does not always allow that. 6 years ago, I bought the house on Foxglove Court because it was boring. The Homeowners Association fined people for leaving garage doors open too long. The most dangerous thing on the street was a teenager on a skateboard. Sophie was 15, sharp-eyed and quiet, still grieving her mother. I wanted her to grow up in a place where no one ever had to learn the sound of a mortar round. The cul-de-sac was supposed to protect us both. The Hargrove family lived 4 houses down. They owned a chain of orthopedic clinics and a black Escalade that always blocked the mailboxes. Their son, Carter, was 21, a second-degree black belt at some academy across town. He wore designer rash guards and bragged about his fight IQ. He also had a habit of standing too close to teenage girls. I warned Sophie to stay away from him. I told his father, Walt, that Carter needed boundaries. Walt laughed and said boys will be boys. Then he reminded me that my lawn was 1 inch over regulation, so I should worry about more important things. Carter started testing me. Not directly at first. He would park in front of my driveway and rev his engine. He would throw protein bar wrappers on my lawn. He would call out Semper Fi in a mocking voice when I checked the mail. He would time his evening jog so he passed Sophie while she was reading on the porch. One afternoon I stepped outside and just watched him. No words, no threats. He stopped jogging, circled once, and kept going. That was the first time I saw hesitation in him. But I also saw something else. He was not used to being observed. He was used to being feared. My silence confused him. The block party happened on the first Saturday of September, hot enough that the asphalt softened underfoot. The Homeowners Association had set up folding tables near the turnaround. Someone brought a sheet cake. Someone else brought a karaoke machine. I was standing by the grill when I heard Sophie's voice rise. Carter had cornered her between the beverage table and a parked minivan. He wasn't touching her, but he had angled his body to block her exit. His friends were laughing. Sophie's face was pale. I moved before I made a conscious decision. I stepped between them and told Carter to back up. He looked at me, grinned, and said, "Relax, old man. We're just talking." Then he shoved me. I don't remember deciding to move. My left hand caught his wrist. My right hand drove down on his elbow. I stepped into his hip, turned, and dropped my weight. None of it required force. It required angle and patience, the same mechanics I had used on men trying to stab me in narrow hallways. Carter's legs went out from under him. He hit the grass hard, face down, his arm pinned behind his back at a lazy angle that threatened no damage but allowed no movement. I held him there for 3 seconds. Then I leaned down and whispered, "We're just talking." His friends thought he tripped. They laughed. That laughter did more to Carter than the fall. Walt Hargrove started screaming about assault and lawsuits. His wife filmed me with her phone. The video surfaced on the neighborhood group chat before midnight, edited with laughing emojis. I stood up, brushed grass from my knees, and walked Sophie home. I did not sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I could feel the old wiring humming under my skin. I had spent years learning to be a father, and one small confrontation had nearly pulled me back into being a weapon. The next morning, the knock came at 7:15. I opened the door to find an old man in a navy coat, gray slacks, polished shoes. His hair was silver. His knuckles were thick with decades of impact. Behind him, Walt's Escalade idled in my driveway, but no one else got out. The old man introduced himself as Haruto Takeda. He said he was Carter's grandfather. Then he apologized for his grandson. I almost believed him. I knew the name Takeda. In my second year in the Raiders, I had studied a combatives manual originally written for the Japanese Self-Defense Force. The author was H. Takeda. The man on my porch had the same stillness, the same economy of movement. Haruto was not a grandfather looking for revenge. He was a former Japanese Self-Defense Force combatives instructor who had spent decades teaching soldiers how to kill with their hands. Then he told me Carter had been raised to perform, not to protect. I know what you are, he said. I see the way you stand, the way you watch. You will not hide from me. His English was precise, every syllable placed like a foot on a mat. I told him I was not interested in a fight. He said, "This is not a fight, it is a correction. I will meet you at my dojo tomorrow evening. Bring no one." I said no. I said I had left that part of my life behind. Haruto looked at me with a small, patient smile. "Then my grandson will return to your daughter. He will test her again. You will either act then or live with the consequence. I offer you a controlled setting. You may refuse. But the cycle will not end." He turned before I could respond. At the curb he paused. 8 o'clock. Takeda Dojo. You will not be late. That evening I sat at the kitchen table with Sophie. She asked if I was really going to fight an old man. I did not have an answer. I only knew that Haruto had not come to threaten me. He had come to read me. And the scariest part was this. In his eyes, I saw no anger, no ego, no need to perform. That was what made him different from his grandson. And it was why I knew that if I walked into his dojo, I would not be walking out the same. At 8 o'clock the next evening, I pulled into the gravel lot behind a defunct bowling alley on the edge of town. The dojo was a cinder block building with no sign, just a faded black kanji painted on the steel door. I sat in the truck for 3 minutes listening to the engine tick. Then I walked inside. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No music, no chatter, no traffic hum. Just the smell of cedar, old sweat, and iron. The floor was dark, polished wood that reflected the low ceiling lights. There were no mirrors, no trophy cases, no bright banners. Along one wall stood a wooden rack of mismatched training knives and short staves. In the center of the room, Haruto Takeda waited, with his hands folded behind his back. He was wearing a plain white gi, the sleeves frayed at the edges. His feet were bare. He did not smile. He simply said, "Remove your shoes. Bow at the threshold. Then stand in front of me." I did as he said. The wood was warm under my feet. Every step I took seemed to echo, though I know it did not. Haruto watched me approach with the patience of a man who had already decided the ending. When I stopped 2 arms lengths away, he said, "There are no rounds, no points, no tap-outs. The match ends when one of us cannot continue, or when I have seen what I came to see." I asked him what he came to see. He did not answer. He only said, "You are a Marine Raider. You have killed with your hands in places where no one was watching. Show me." He raised his hands, not in a classic guard. His left hand hung low, his right hand extended slightly, fingers open. His stance was narrow, almost casual. I raised my own guard, boxing heavy, retired instinct. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Haruto tilted his head and said, "Your breath is shallow. You are already afraid of what you might become." He was right. I just would not say it. He stepped in. No feint, no explosion. A simple sliding step that closed the distance before my eyes could adjust. His open left hand snapped toward my face. I parried with my right arm and stepped back. But he was already gone, circling to my blind side. By the time I turned, his palm was an inch from my temple. He did not strike. He simply tapped my skull with 2 fingers, then moved away. "Again," he said. I swallowed. The old man had crossed the gap without a sound. No bounce, no wasted weight. The H Takeda system I remembered from the manual had a name: Kage no Ashi, Shadow Step. It was designed to break an attacker's perception before breaking their body. I had thought it was theory. Now it was standing in front of me. We circled. My pulse settled into a rhythm I had not felt since Fallujah. Not panic, something older. The part of me that understood there was no referee in the room. Haruto flipped his left hand from open palm to a loose fist and launched a straight punch at my sternum. I slipped right, brought my left elbow down to intercept his wrist. Bone met bone. The shock went through my arm like a nail. He did not flinch. His other hand was already gripping my collar. Before I could pry it loose, he planted his foot behind my heel and dropped his weight. I did not fall. I sprawled, caught his hip, and drove my forearm across his chest. We locked there, chest to chest, breath hot and controlled. His eyes were completely still. He whispered, "You are heavier than I expected." "Good," he let go first. He stepped back, adjusted his gi, and rolled his neck. "But you fight like a man trying not to kill. That hesitation will cost you." I said I had made a promise to myself. He asked me if that promise would protect my daughter. The question landed harder than any strike. I realized then that Haruto was not trying to beat me. He was trying to strip me down until only the weapon remained. I reset. My hands came up higher. My weight settled onto the balls of my feet. He saw the change. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "There you are," he said. Then he moved again, this time with real intent. His low kick was not like Carter's telegraph leg kick. It was short, hidden behind a shuffle, and it cracked against my lead calf before I could check it. The muscle went dead for half a second. I forced myself to step through the numbness, then snapped a right cross toward his jaw. He did not block it. He simply was not there. My fist passed through the space where his head had been, and I felt his open hand press flat against my ribs. He pushed, not hard, but at the exact angle to spin me off balance. I stumbled 2 steps. Before I recovered, he was behind me, one arm snaking across my throat. Not squeezing, just resting. "You are dead," he said. Then he released me and walked to the center of the room. He turned to face me. "I have been watching you for 3 months." The words stopped me cold. 3 months. Before the block party. Before Carter's shove. He had seen me at the grocery store, at the library with Sophie, standing outside the high school in my old flannel. He had studied my gait, my posture, my awareness. He knew exactly what I was before he ever knocked on my door. "You knew Carter was going to shove me," I said. Haruto shook his head. "I knew he would fail. My grandson is a performer. He does not understand consequence. But I needed to see what you would do when pushed. And you showed me restraint." He raised a finger. "Restraint is not weakness. But in a true fight, restraint without decision is death. I brought you here to teach you what no American dojo ever could." I asked him why. Why an old man would stage his own grandson's humiliation to get a stranger in his dojo. Haruto looked at me for a long moment. Then he untied his gi and let it fall to the floor. The body beneath was not the body of a 72-year-old man. His chest and shoulders were laced with tight, dense muscle, the kind built through decades of daily practice. Across his left side ran a long pale scar, wet looking under the light, a knife wound, deep and old. On his right shoulder was a small black tattoo, a single straight line inside a circle. I did not know the symbol, but it made my stomach clench. Because you are the first real opponent I have met in 30 years, he said. And because if you do not learn to stop hesitating, you will lose more than a fight. Now raise your hands. We are not finished. I raised my hands. Something in the room had shifted. The cold, patient dojo felt smaller. The silence pressed against my ears. Haruto's hands hung low and loose. He began to breathe in long, slow cycles. The air in his lungs sounded like the tide. I recognized the technique. It was a state cultivated to slow the heart, sharpen the eyes, and remove all fear. Men who could do it while moving were not fighters. They were predators. Then he came. It was not a flurry. It was a single step, followed by a series of strikes so economical they were almost invisible. Palm heel to my solar plexus, ridge hand to my jaw, knee to my thigh. I blocked the first, slipped the second, but the third buckled my leg. I threw a left hook, aiming for his liver. He caught my wrist in the crook of his arm, wrenched it down, and drove his forehead against my shoulder. I staggered. The pain was distant. What frightened me was not the technique. It was his eyes. There was no cruelty in them, no anger, only an immense quiet certainty. He was not trying to hurt me. He was measuring exactly how much violence it would take to break the thing I had been hiding, and he was already close to the answer. He released my wrist and stepped back. "You can do better," Haruto said. "Show me the man who survived Anbar." The old scar on my collarbone throbbed. The room seemed to tilt. I was no longer in a quiet dojo behind a bowling alley. I was back in a narrow room with dust in my throat and a blade coming at me. I blinked hard. When I looked again, Haruto was still waiting. "There is no past here," he said. "Only this moment. Now move." I did not think. I drove forward, feinted high, then dropped low for a single-leg takedown. He sprawled perfectly, but I had expected it. I rolled, trapped his arm, and tried to take his back. For the first time, his movement became urgent. He twisted, freed his hip, and shoved a thumb into the nerve behind my knee. My leg buckled. Then he was on top, not with weight but with structure, his forearm across my jaw, his other hand pinning my wrist. I could not breathe. I could not move. His face floated above mine, calm, utterly without effort. "You know how to kill," he said, "but you have forgotten how to choose when not to. That choice is the only difference between a warrior and a weapon." He stood, offering me his hand. I did not take it, but I did look up, and I knew the worst part was still coming. He had not yet begun to fight. I didn't take his hand. I stayed on the mat, breathing through my nose, the old tremor in my hands finally still. Haruto looked down at me and spoke in that same precise voice. "For 18 years, someone else told you when to kill. Now no one gives the order. That silence is why you hesitate, and hesitation is the only enemy you never trained to defeat." I got to my feet. Something had peeled back. Not anger, not fear. The cold thing. It was awake now, and Haruto knew it. He stepped back and raised his hands again. This time, his guard was different. His weight dropped, his hands turned flat, and his eyes stopped blinking. "Now," he said, "we will see what remains." He moved. Not fast, but inevitable. His palm struck toward my throat, stopping an inch short. His knee came up, then changed direction into a low line to my thigh. I managed to check part of it. The impact sent white light through my leg. He did not follow. He simply flowed to my right, his foot hooking behind my calf. I went down hard. Before I hit, he caught my wrist and wrenched my arm straight. I thought he would break it. He released me an inch before pain became injury. "1," he counted softly. I rolled away and stood. The room seemed colder. The old scar on my ribs pulsed. I drove at him with a jab, then a cross, then a hard low kick. He faded at impossibly small angles. His hands made tiny circles, redirecting each strike. On the third one, he pinned my arm against his side and drove his open hand into my ribs, just above the old shrapnel wound. Pain folded me. I dropped to one knee. 2. There was no malice in the count. That was the worst part. He was not punishing me. He was clinically proving a point. Some corner of my mind flashed to Fallujah, the same clinical calm when I had cleared rooms where every shadow carried a blade. I had not needed permission then. I had simply acted. But here, in the dojo, I was asking for permission from a retired father's version of myself. Haruto lowered his hands. Your daughter would not recognize the man on this mat. And that is why you are losing. I stood again. The cold thing was no longer whispering. It was screaming. But I still held it. Barely. Haruto tilted his head. Interesting. You still believe restraint is the answer. He walked toward the wall, took a wooden knife from the rack and tossed it to me. I caught it automatically. The weight was familiar. Show me what you remember. He picked up a second one, shorter, and I will show you why I am worse than my grandson. We circled. He did not rush. The wooden blade in his hand moved in tiny, patient arcs. I recognized the grip, the angles. He was testing me, not attacking. I stepped in, feinted high, and slashed low. He parried with his own blade, then spun inside my reach. His free hand caught my wrist, not a punch, a control. The back of his knife tapped my kidney. 3, I shoved him away. He allowed it. You are fighting as if I am an enemy. I am not. I am a mirror. I did not want a mirror. I wanted to leave. But my feet would not move. Why are you doing this? My voice came out ragged. Haruto lowered his weapon. For the first time, he looked not at me, but through me. Because my grandson is not the only failure. I spent 30 years teaching men to be weapons. Then I came home and watched my daughter marry a man who turned my grandson into a vanity project. They called it luxury. I called it rot. I could not undo it. But I could find someone who still knew the difference. He took a breath. I found you. I asked how long he had been planning this. He said since the first time he saw me dropping Sophie at school, 3 years earlier. He had seen the way I scanned the parking lot, the way I waited until she was inside before driving away. He knew. Then, he waited. He let Carter become the bait. The block party was not an accident. Carter had been encouraged by Walt to push me, but the shove was Carter's own stupidity. Haruto did not intend the shove, but he allowed it to lead here. He used the entire situation to force this confrontation. Before I could respond, the side door banged open. I turned. The man who stepped inside was not a student. It was Walt Hargrove. He was breathing hard, his expensive polo soaked with sweat. In his hand was a cell phone, the screen lit. He had not come to watch. He had come to stop something. Haruto's expression did not change. You were told not to come, he said. Walt ignored him. He pointed at me. You're not going to win this. Then he threw the phone onto the mat. The screen showed a live security feed from my own house. In it, Sophie was standing just inside the front door. Carter was outside, barefoot, holding a tire iron. He was not alone. I stopped breathing. The cold thing went very still. Then Walt spoke the words that changed everything. Your daughter just called 911. But the police are 12 minutes out. Carter has a key to the side gate. He's not going to hurt her. He's just going to wait for you to come home. And when you do, he's going to make you watch. Haruto stepped between me and the door. Now you understand the urgency. My hands were already shaking. The real test was never in this room, Haruto said. It is what you do next. If you run out of here as a weapon, my grandson will get exactly what he wants. If you run out as a father, you still may have to hurt him. The question is whether you can stop before it becomes murder. He looked at the phone. There is no time. Go. I ran. Haruto did not follow. The last thing I heard was Walt's voice, suddenly less certain. Wait, Dad. That wasn't the plan. The drive home took 9 minutes. I made it in 7. As I turned onto Foxglove Court, I saw the blue lights just pulling up from the other end. Carter was still in the yard. He had not seen me yet. Sophie was behind the glass door. She looked terrified. And somewhere behind me, a black sedan rolled to a stop, killing its lights. The real fight had not ended. It had just followed me home. I parked 2 houses down and killed the engine. The police cruiser was still at the corner, its lights sweeping through the wet leaves. Carter had not seen me. He was facing the front door, the tire iron resting against his thigh. Sophie stood behind the glass, phone raised, her face pale and streaked. The side gate hung open. Behind me, the black sedan had gone dark, but I knew Haruto was watching. I did not go through the front yard. I moved along the side fence, through the shadow of the bottle brush, my footsteps lost in the hum of cicadas. The old part of me took over. My breathing slowed. My weight shifted forward. I counted the distance, 40 feet, 30, 20. Carter leaned close to the door and said something I couldn't hear. Sophie backed up, shaking her head. That was enough. I stepped into the porch light. My boots scraped the walk. Carter spun, and for a second I saw the same panic from the block party, masked by a grin too wide to be real. There he is, he said too loud. The big Marine. He raised the tire iron and pointed it at me. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I told you I'd make you watch. I kept walking. Police are seconds away, I said. Put it down. He laughed, a brittle, unbalanced sound. Then I'll tell them you attacked me. Who are they going to believe? The rich kid or the scarred-up old man who broke my arm at a party? Behind the glass, Sophie banged her fist once. I almost looked at her. Almost, but I had learned from Haruto that the moment you take your eyes off a threat, the test is over. So I kept my gaze on Carter. Sophie, I said, steady, lock the door. She did not. She stayed exactly where she was, the phone still raised. I knew why. She wanted a record. She was smarter than I had given her credit for. Carter swung. The tire iron came in a wide, desperate arc, exactly like every bad decision that had led him to this driveway. I did not try to block it. I stepped inside, caught his wrist with my left hand, and drove the heel of my right palm into his sternum, just enough to hold his breath. Then I hooked my foot behind his ankle and dropped my weight. His own momentum did the rest. The tire iron bounced off the concrete with a clang. Carter hit the ground face first, one arm pinned behind his back, my knee across his hip, not his neck. I kept my hands open. You came to my house, I said, my voice low. You brought a weapon. You threatened my daughter. You don't get to be the victim. He thrashed, tried to bite my ankle, so I shifted and pinned his other wrist. The position was ugly, but controlled. I could feel the line between holding a man and breaking him, and I stayed on the right side of it. For 18 years, I had trained to hurt people. For 6 years, I had trained to stop. It took every second of those 6 years to stay still. The first officer rounded the corner with his weapon drawn, shouting at me to get on the ground. I did not argue. I released Carter, rolled to my knees, and laced my fingers on top of my head. The second officer came from the other side. I heard Sophie's voice, high and shaking. He had a tire iron. He tried to hit my dad. I called you. I have the video. Carter tried to crawl away, but the first officer stopped him with a hand between his shoulder blades. Then the black sedan door opened. Haruto walked up the driveway with both hands visible, barefoot beneath a dark raincoat. He looked older now, smaller, but his voice carried. I have a statement, he said. That young man is my grandson. The man on the ground is my student. I saw everything. The officer held up a hand. Haruto stopped, patient as always. Walt's Escalade barreled around the corner before the officer could speak. He jumped out, red-faced, jabbing a finger at me. Officer, this lunatic attacked my son. I have lawyers. I'll sue. But Sophie was already pointing at the small white camera above the front door. Its blue light blinked. It's been recording since 7, she said, her voice steadier now. As if she had been waiting her whole life to say it. It caught everything. Haruto looked at me, then at Carter in handcuffs, then back at the camera. Everything, he repeated, and the word landed like a sentence. The officers reviewed the footage on a tablet in the front seat of the cruiser. Carter sat in the back, head down, the tire iron bagged and tagged on the curb. Walt paced, screaming about civil rights and false arrest. I stood on the lawn, hands loose, trying to keep the tremor in my right hand from returning. Haruto walked over and stood beside me, close enough that only I could hear him. "You did not kill him," he said. I said nothing. "That is why I chose you." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the first officer returned before I could. The story the video told was clear. Carter had hopped the side fence, opened it from inside, and crossed the yard with a tire iron in his hand. He had threatened Sophie through the glass. He had swung first at me. I was not charged. Carter was transported to county jail. Before the ambulance checked my wrist, Haruto placed something in my palm. A small black key. "You were never supposed to fight Carter," he said. "Only a fool tests a blade against a stone." I asked what the key was for. He nodded toward the dojo. "My grandson attacked your daughter with a weapon. He will not teach anyone again. The building is mine. I am closing it. But first, you will come tomorrow at dawn." I shook my head. "I'm done." Haruto almost smiled. "No, you are just beginning." Then he walked back to the sedan and drove away, leaving me on the lawn with the sirens fading and the neighborhood lights blinking on one by one. I didn't sleep that night. Sophie sat on the couch, wrapped in her mother's old quilt, and I watched the doorbell video again and again in the dark. The moment Carter raised the tire iron, the moment he swung, the moment I put him down. It looked calm, almost gentle. For the first time, I understood what Haruto had meant in the dojo. The choice was not between violence and peace. It was between being a weapon and being a man. Somewhere in those 7 seconds, I had chosen. At dawn, I went to the dojo. Haruto was already there, dressed in street clothes, emptying the wooden weapons from the rack into a canvas bag. The room felt smaller, no longer a cage. He did not bow. He simply pointed to a cabinet against the back wall. Inside were 2 framed photographs and a small lacquered box. One photo showed a young Japanese soldier in a faded uniform. The other showed the same man years later, gaunt and hollow-eyed, standing in front of a burned house. "My brother," Haruto said. "He was the same kind of man. He could not stop. One night he came home to find his own son being beaten. He ended 2 men. Then he ended himself. He did not know how to choose. He closed the cabinet. I taught men to kill for 30 years. I did not teach them how to come back. You already knew, but you forgot. Last night reminded you." The cold thing inside me stirred, but this time it felt like something I could hold, not something that held me. Haruto handed me a folded paper. It was an offer to teach a small class of veterans at the dojo, once a week, no money. "You will not teach them to fight. You will teach them to stop." I asked why he thought I could do that. He looked at me with those unreadable eyes. "Because you are a warrior who never truly retired. You only found new reasons. That is what we are." He started walking toward the door. Before he left, he paused. "The Hargroves have withdrawn their threats. Your daughter's name will not appear in any report. That is my last gift." I asked why he would do that. He said, "Because we are the same. Now teach." Then he was gone. That evening, Sophie and I sat on the back porch while the sprinklers ticked in the dark. She asked if I was okay. I said yes, and for the first time it was almost true. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, I have to tell you something." I didn't reconnect the doorbell camera because of a package. I turned to look at her. She was staring at the fence line. 2 nights ago, Carter was standing outside my window. I saw him from the bathroom. He didn't see me, but I knew he'd come back. So I reconnected the camera. My chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, a small, sad motion. "Because I wanted to handle it, like you taught me. And because I knew if I told you, you'd go over there." She looked at me then, her eyes bright. "You didn't kill him. That's why I recorded. Not for proof. For you." I pulled her close and didn't let go until the porch light flickered off. 3 weeks later, Carter pleaded down to a misdemeanor. He lost his certification, his car, and the few friends who had not already stopped returning his calls. Walt stopped waving at neighbors. The house on the corner went up for sale by spring. I started the veterans class. 6 men showed up the first night. One had a tremor in both hands. One couldn't look me in the eye. I taught them what Haruto had taught me: how to breathe, how to move, how to choose. On the last day of the month, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a wooden knife, smooth and polished, the edge worn from years of use. There was no note, but I knew who sent it. I hung it in the garage, where I could see it every morning when I opened the door. It was not a weapon anymore. It was a reminder. Some warriors never truly retire. They just stop believing they have to fight alone. That is what Haruto Takeda taught me. And that is the only reason Carter Hargrove did not become another name on a report. He thought he was the predator. He was really the blessing none of us saw coming. Most people see a story like this and think the ending is the arrest. It isn't. The real ending happened years earlier, when a quiet man decided the deadliest thing he owned wasn't a skill, but a choice. Haruto Takeda didn't challenge me because he wanted a fight. He challenged me because he saw a man disappearing inside his own peace. And the only thing worse than losing a fight is losing the reason you stopped fighting in the first place. The truth about warriors is, they don't come home whole. They come home with a switch that never fully turns off. The question isn't whether they can still be dangerous, it's whether they can stand in a doorway and choose the lock instead of the hammer. I almost forgot how. Haruto reminded me. And Carter, for all his cruelty, became the test. That is the meaning of the old man's words: some warriors never retire. It's not a warning. It's an invitation to use the one weapon no one can take from you: restraint. I think about Sophie often. She saw the camera before I did. She understood that evidence matters more than revenge. She didn't want me to kill Carter. She wanted me to survive the memory. That's a different kind of courage, and I suspect it's the kind Haruto noticed from the beginning. The dojo is quieter these days. The veterans come on Thursday nights. They breathe, they move, they talk. Some of them still shake, but they keep showing up. That's the point. Maybe you're carrying something old. 2, maybe the world pushed you into a corner and you surprised yourself with what you remembered. If this story reached you, it's because some part of you understands the line between training and trauma. I didn't plan to become a teacher. I planned to water the lawn, raise my daughter, and disappear. But the old man saw otherwise. He gave me a wooden knife and a key I never asked for. Some gifts look like burdens until you hold them long enough to see the shape of your own life inside. Now I'll ask you the same question I ask every man who steps onto that mat. What are you really holding? And can you put it down without losing yourself? Have you ever seen someone's arrogance backfire in a way that changed you? Tell me in the comments. If this reminded you that the quietest people carry the heaviest doors, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about the strength that hides in ordinary lives, subscribe now. We'll be here. Thanks for watching. The next story is already waiting.